Now let me just tell you what you already know, and that our opponents, whether it is the Republican establishment, Democratic establishment, whether it is Wall Street, the insurance companies, drug companies, fossil fuel industry, military industrial complex, prison industrial complex, the whole damn 1%. They're not going to give up their wealth and their power without a fight. And the question that we have got to answer together is, are we prepared to stand up to them and transform this country? I want you all to take a look around and find someone you don't know. Maybe somebody who doesn't look kind of like you. Maybe somebody who might be of a different religion than you. Maybe they come from a different country. My question now to you is, are you willing to fight for that person who you don't even know as much as you're willing to fight for yourself?
This, honestly, in both campaigns, is one of the best lines that Sanders has had. Are you willing to fight for somebody else in the same way you are willing to fight for yourself? God, I love that line. It takes politics to this level of a recognition that you have dollars or you have pitchforks, especially if you're running from a standpoint of, I am running to harness public will to make changes structurally. You have dollars or pitchforks. And for the longest time, you've only had dollars. And Sanders, who calls himself a democratic socialist in order to make himself distinct from the other people, not to mention going with a certain ideology of the world, is going to need to harness both to get rid of this kind of entrenched corruption that pervades our politics, where the 1% needs are attended to, while everybody else, for the most part, can buy their Doritos and whatever else. Warren has took a political strategy to ape Sanders. And at this point, I don't even think that's a controversial statement. Everything from canceling student debt, everything from the climate change policy to criminal justice policy, stuff that he's been pushing for years, she'd come out with and media will fawn over for, missing the fact that Sanders had been putting that stuff out for years. And of course, his signature achievement, Medicare for all. Now, people have yelled at me because I continuously make the point that Medicare for all is a bill. But when you have people aping your policies, you must define your terms. And by the way, it's not just aping policies. Listen to this.
That we pick up each other's fights as our own. That we pick up the fight over immigration, whether we're immigrants or not. That we pick up the fight on how our children are losing out in public education, whether we have children in public education or not. That we pick up these fights. That we pick up the importance of protecting our pensions, whether we have a pension, whether we're decades away from a pension. That we pick up each other's fights as our own. That we pick up each other's fights as our own.
Does that sound familiar? Effectively, what she is saying is, are you willing to fight for somebody who is not like you? She's even taking his verbiage in the way that they're running their campaigns. My point is, she has flagrantly and assiduously aped him in order to give the public a perspective that these two quantities are 1 to 1. People have yelled at me because my Virgoan tendency, Virgo sun, Virgo ascendant, to call a thing what it is. Meaning, Medicare for all is a bill. And I've been very stick-to-itive to this point. of defining my terms that when I talk about Medicare for all, I am talking about a legal document, a bill that Bernie Sanders was the sponsor of in the Senate, with Jayapal being the sponsor in the House. People have gotten on me, but it is very important to define your terms. And if somebody else is coming up with something and they're calling it Medicare for all, but it's not the bill, then they are intentionally being disingenuous, considering that the naming, the signature, is already attached to a document. The only reason they would do that is if they wanted to be disingenuous and intentionally deceive the public into thinking that whatever they are pushing is somehow synonymous with this bill, this legal document, this text. I appreciate Pete Buttigieg and Tulsi Gabbard naming their policies something else. Gold star. The others, not so much. Yang, Kamala Harris, and yes, Elizabeth Warren. I have said on this channel on more than one occasion that Elizabeth Warren is not for Medicare for all. I've said it on more than one occasion. I had no reason to believe that she was. She would get on the campaign stage, she would argue for it, but the moment that she got off the stage, she's talking about Medicare for all as if it's something else, as if it's something subjective, and it just kind of, that is not an actual legal document. Not to mention, when you asked her back in 2013...
If you were the czarina, something like single-payer healthcare, government-run payer, far lower administrative costs, that sort of thing, would be the Senator Warren prescription, would it not?
And I think right now what we have to do, I'm serious about this, I think you've got to stay with what's possible. And I think what we're doing, and look at the dust up around this, we really need to consolidate our gains around what we've got on this.
But you do support single-payer, do you not?
No, what I've got right now...
That you have you not?
She says, no, I don't support single payer at all. I don't know where you get your information from, buddy, but that's not me. I'm very distrustful of people who have evolutions at the presidency. Sanders has believed in this and has thought about this for the past 40 years. It digs into him. Evolutions at the presidency. I'm not alone in my not believing this. This is Harry Reid. Come on, Harry. Well, if Harry Reid was going to talk, Harry Reid was going to say the exact same thing, that he did not believe.
Concern as well that's expressed by some establishment Democrats that she is too far left.
I think that's, let's just wait. For example, Medicare for all, asked me, how do you feel about that? I said, I think what we need to do first is let's make sure Obamacare is strengthened again. Republicans have done everything they can to hurt it. Let's strengthen it. We almost got the public option the first time. That's as good as Medicare for all anyway. And so
that's not what she's saying, though.
Well, but I think you give her some time. I think that she's not in love with that. I think you'll wait and see how that all turns out.
So you think she's more pragmatic than...
Oh, I know she's...
Right there, pragmatism. I don't think she's for that. Give her some time on that. Harry Reid and I were absolutely and entirely correct. Elizabeth Warren is not for Medicare for all. And to make a first point, when she came out with her payment plan, how are you going to pay for it? I was somewhat vindicated even with that, because it shows that she hadn't entirely thought about Medicare for all and got stuck on this point of whether middle class taxes were going to go up, and ends up putting out a plan that has bad incentives in the first place, but hides the ball in regards to middle class taxes. And now, fully vindicated, when Warren has come out with her Medicare for all transition plan, the plan to transition to Medicare for all. Basically, it's a public option, a means-tested public option, with the promise that in 3 years, she'd fight like hell to actually get Medicare for all. This is Pete Buttigieg's plan that people have started to notice. This is just Pete Buttigieg's plan. I mean, Pete Buttigieg says the same thing. Public option, means tested, and then Medicare for all at some point in the future, 3 years later. Now, the catch here is that the means tested. It's not that it's a bad plan. The point is not really the plan per se. The point is she has gone around screaming about Medicare for all, and then the plan that she puts out is effectively a public option. And it's a public option that tells people that, no, really, I'm going to push for Medicare for all in like 3 years. You just got to trust me. But think about it. As a rational human being, does that really make sense? She is saying she's going to get 2 bites at the apple in 3 years. 2 huge pieces of legislation that is going to be fought tooth to nail in 3 years. She is literally going to give up the Congress that she supposedly has the mandate with into an unspecific future where oftentimes, at least most of the time, the party in power loses their majority. She's not being honest with you. She's being disingenuous. Nate Silver even notices Warren's language here is really not that far from Buttigieg's former position on Medicare for all, which is that the public option would naturally lead to transition to Medicare for all once the public saw its benefits. Pete Buttigieg's person comes back and says, no, that is literally Pete Buttigieg's position now. I don't necessarily like to boast that I'm right. That's a lie. I kind of do. But I was right on this. Warren is not for Medicare for all. She is for a public option. Warren wanted to run a campaign where she could say, I am for Medicare for all, because she wanted to be a one-to-one with Sanders on the issue of healthcare. And being honest and saying, I am for a public option is not the same thing as running and saying, I am for Medicare for all. So again, making the tactical choice to say, okay, I'm for Medicare for all, but really I'm for a public option. If she would have said I'm for a public option, that would have been honest. My issue here is it's a disingenuous way of just trying to get stuck with the public option. I want to talk about this. Some people are saying, well, look, maybe she's naive. I don't buy that, because Warren has been flagrantly disingenuous and dishonest and insincere in the way that she's run this campaign on a host of issues, especially on this issue of healthcare and on the issue of the grassroots fundraising and the fundraising in general. I would like to talk about it. I will try to be swift, but I can't sleep, and where real men can't sleep, they do the news. And Medicare for all is my litmus test. And I have been a bit of a dick in regards to this, because I don't like people hiding the ball on this. Tell the public what you stand for on this, so the public is voting for you. They know who they're voting for, as opposed to this notion of softening the position once you get out of the primary when people are stuck with you. In this case, the public hounded her to the point where she had to put out her plan, that plan being a public option, with the hope later, at some point, in getting to Medicare for all in 3 years. Let's talk about that, because I want to nail home how impractical and almost impossible that will be. If you're going to get Medicare for all, you're going to get it with the mandate Congress that you get in office with, not with some secondary Congress that you're going to have to take 2 huge lifts in the course of 3 years. And by the way, this is not just me saying this. Have you seen the stock market? If you take a look at the stock market, they were hooing and hawing about hitting over 28,000. We hit over 28,000, yes! And I'm looking at the market like, why is it doing that? Why is it doing that? Healthcare stocks. Healthcare stocks went through the roof when Warren put this plan out, because they know what I know. It's impractical, meaning the healthcare companies most likely aren't going anywhere under Warren's plan. And the healthcare insurance companies in the stock market know it. And I do too. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. If you dig this content, like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal Patron. Why don't I give her the benefit of the doubt? I don't give her the benefit of the doubt because I don't think she ran a campaign where she was being sincere. She comes in and says, I'm going to be grassroots funded. She immediately takes money from her Senate campaign, which is not grassroots funded, and dumps it into her primary. Then she says, I'm going to take money once I get out of the primary. And the operative question is, well, why? You have no issue taking money before. You're going to have no issue taking money after. Why just in this little primary are you willing to do that? And the question becomes clear. She wants to stand beside Sanders as a one-to-one. That has been her strategy the entire way through. If she is taking money, she can't stand beside him as a one-to-one on grassroots funding. That's why. Again, disingenuous, even in the sense of calling it grassroots, seeing as she pulled money from her other campaign. Medicare for all. Rational human being, rational man. Do you honestly believe that Warren is going to get 2 bites at the apple? Think of Obamacare for the moment. Obama had the House, he had a supermajority in the Senate, and he had the presidency. How long did it take Obamacare to get done? And on top of how long it's taking Obamacare to get done, that is going to be a political fight. That is going to be a tussle all the way through. And do you believe that Warren doesn't know that? And that's if everything goes right. Meaning she's saying 3 years. How long is it going to take to pass the law, to implement the law? And then within roughly 2 years, she's going to have that fight again. And this time with the secondary Congress. Here's the catch. The president's party has lost an average of 26 seats in the House and an average of 4 seats in the Senate on an off mid-year. Ronald Reagan, it goes to the Democrats. Bill Clinton, it goes to the Republicans, both houses. George Bush, they first lose the House. Barack Obama, he gets House, Senate, but again, it eventually goes to the Republicans. And what happens under Trump? First midterm election, it goes to Democrats. Do you believe that Warren is unclear on this? No, she probably is very clear on this, which is probably why she put it at the 3rd year specifically. What about the Medicare for All thing, by the way? Warren stands on stage with Sanders. Sanders wrote the bill. They keep hounding her. Are you going to raise middle-class taxes? Sanders says yes. Middle-class taxes will go up. However, they will be compensated by the massive increase in their wages, the largest increase in a generation. So the small amount that they have to pay in taxes will be based on their means and their ability to pay. From the standpoint of the healthcare, however, they're covered head to toe without having to pay at the point of service. Now, yes, Warren, our middle class tax is going to go up. She doesn't want to answer that for political reasons. If you're for Medicare for all, this guy wrote the bill. The honest answer is yes. But she says no. And she puts out a bill that hides the ball. Now, think about this for a moment. If you put a regressive head tax on a company, what is that company going to do with that? Do you believe that company is just going to accept the head tax, or do you believe they're going to pass that head tax on to their employees? Their companies, their goal is to maximize their profit. If you have a company that was making $30,000 and you're telling that company that you have a $9,800, nearly $10,000 head tax to put on every employee that they hire. If you're going to pay this guy $30,000, now this guy costs $40,000. Nearly a third of what you're going to pay them has to be added on top for healthcare. What will they do? They're going to cut his wages. It is a natural and easily foreseeable thing that the company itself is going to cut the wages of the employee in order to compensate for the tax, the head tax that Warren is putting on. Not to mention, it doesn't even go up as employees' wages go up. So if a person was making $200,000 or if a person was making $30,000, the head tax is the same. She's hiding the ball like this because she doesn't want to own up to, yes, middle class taxes will go up. The problem here is that every reporter, for the most part, assumes that every person in this country believes that they're going to have to pay something for their health care. Nobody believes health care is for free. And Warren is effectively saying, yes, your health care is free. That's not true. You're still being taxed. The only difference here is that the tax is coming out of you from the standpoint of the employer who is cutting your wages to compensate for the head tax that Warren is putting on the employer. She's hiding the ball. She's not being honest. And by the way, just so we're clear, listen to this. Does this sound familiar?
As the solution, we could try that to solve homelessness by mandating everybody buy a house. The reason they don't have a house is they don't have the money. And so our focus has been on reducing costs, making it available. I am confident that if people have a chance to buy high quality health care that is affordable, they will do so. And that's what our plan does, and nobody disputes that. every expert has said that anybody who wants health care under my plan will be able to obtain it. President Clinton's own Secretary of Labor has said that my plan does more to reduce costs and, as a consequence, make sure that the people who need health care right now, all across Ohio, all across Texas, Rhode Island, Vermont, all across America, will be able to obtain it. And we do more to reduce costs than any other plan that's been out there. Now, I have no objection to Senator Clinton thinking that her approach is superior, but the fact of the matter is that if, as we've heard tonight, we still don't know how Senator Clinton intends to enforce a mandate, and if we don't know the level of subsidies that she's going to provide, then you can have a situation, which we're seeing right now in the state of Massachusetts, where people are being fined for not having purchased health care, but choose to accept the fine because they still can't afford it even with the subsidies. And they are then worse off. They then have no health care and are paying a fine above and beyond that. That is a genuine difference between myself and Senator Clinton. And the last point I would make is the insurance companies actually are happy to have a mandate. The insurance companies don't mind making sure that everybody has to purchase their.
Just so we're clear, that's Barack Obama arguing against the individual mandate. Now, if you're confused, especially if you're younger and you're a kid, you might look at that and be like, what? How is Obama arguing against the individual mandate? When Obama got in office, the first thing Obama did was put through the individual mandate with the health care plan. Yes, you shouldn't be confused. He lied. He took a political advantage with Clinton in trying to make a deviation between what she was pushing for versus what he was pushing for. Clinton essentially said, look, you need an individual mandate if you're going to ensure everybody has health care. This is the neoliberal way of trying to do it. The utopian vision that insurance companies can do awesomely well, and then people can also do equally well while they're getting raped over the coals. But he took a political choice to deviate from Clinton on this notion of individual mandate. I'm for the exact same thing she's for. However, I am not for the individual mandate. I don't believe we should be forcing people to pay for health care at all. And then what does he do? He gets in office and he passes the individual mandate. And what does the public do? Nothing. My argument from day one was that Elizabeth Warren didn't mean it. She was going to put out a plan. And whatever the plan, her supporters were going to say, this is Medicare for all. And assuming that she was outside of the primary, they would have accepted whatever she put out because she would have been going against Donald Trump. When they pushed through Obamacare, what did they say? There were 20 million people still who didn't have health care, and they called it universal health care. Warren was going to do the same thing. I am old enough to remember this trick from last time. Why aren't her supporters? And by the way, this part of Warren's plan that she's supposed to be using to pay for Medicare for all, which is not Medicare for all, but is Pete's care. From here on out, let's call it Pete Buttigieg's care. Part of it was supposedly paid for by cutting the military budget. Now, Warren backed Trump's military budget, and when Emma Vigeland asked her about it, she essentially said, yes, that corrupt budget, we need to do something about that. And Emma Vigeland didn't say, wait, you voted for a corrupt military budget or a budget that you knew was corrupt? Listen to this. How about this one?
Sam Husseini with The Nation and the Institute for Public Accuracy. Cortez, who was mentioned earlier, and other likely incoming congressional members next year propose slashing the military budget to help pay for human and environmental needs. Do you agree? And if I could, a second question, would you consider introducing and sponsoring Betty McCollum's bill on Palestinian children's rights in the Senate?
So I now sit on armed services. And boy, I have been in the middle of the sausage making factory on that one. And that has pushed me even more strongly in the direction of systemic reforms. I want to be able to have those debates. I want to be able to get them out in the open and talk about these core issues that affect our government, affect our people. I want to be able to debate them on the floor of the Senate. I want to be able to do amendments on them. Right now, the hold of big money over our government stops much of that. It chokes off much of the debate we should have. So I'm going to give you a system-wide answer because I think that's what matters here.
You didn't give him an answer at all. You didn't give him an answer at all. And weirder, in order to pay for her Medicare for All plan, cutting the military budget was part of it. The answer to this question, if she is being serious, had to be yes. Just yes. In order to pay for Medicare for All, I'm going to cut the military budget. That's part of the human services stuff. So yes, I'm going to cut the military budget when I get in office as president. Not this weird sausage-making answer. Why should I take her as being naive on this as opposed to just being disingenuous? Explain to me. Explain to me. And for the last point, they wanted to call this a public option, or I'm sorry, they wanted to call this Medicare for All effectively a public option. These are gimmicks. They're just tactical turns that she's using to get from point A to point B. I mean, she put her hands up for reparations. Nobody knew what reparations even was at the time. She was for impeachment, just like AOC, again, trying to get this resistance crowd and get around these type of angles. My basic point is this. I don't take Warren as being sincere here. I take her as being disingenuous. I take her campaign as trying to figure out ways to get around Sanders. And in getting around Sanders, trying to be a one-to-one and try to ape him on these policies. The problem is Sanders has thought about these policies for a while. And in getting into these issues where she has to either explain it or people pry into it, it to some degree falls apart. If she wanted to be grassroots funded, she could have been grassroots funded. If she wanted to take money after the primary, she could have just as well taken it in the primary. All of these things were just tricks. The climate policy, the criminal policy, all of these things were just gimmicks to get her from point A to point B. And you really have to believe in the candidate. Do they mean it? And there has to be sufficient evidence, some level of sincerity associated with it for you to believe it. Many of these issues she evolved on at the moment. And please be honest. Be honest. She is trying to tell you that she is going to get ultimate goal being Medicare for All. But she's going to pass a public option that is going to sap all the energy and the strength out of any notion of getting the Medicare for All. What is going to happen is she is going to, if by chance she gets this pass, we're to believe that she is going to have another fight in 3 years. And again, 3 years assumes that she immediately gets this pass. All of this stuff is just, it's magical thinking. It's effectively her taking a pony in order to buy a unicorn. And this, I have to be honest, her supporters are not doing single payer any favors and supporting her in this. Yeah, I'll leave it here. I mean, this was, reading that plan and then seeing the response of people, it was utterly ludicrous. It was ludicrous. But I'll leave it here. I just tell me what you believe in. Like, my aggravation with this is, she could have honestly just said, I'm for public option. Her public option, by the way, is not bad. It's not a bad plan in the least. But the issue here is honesty. It's this notion of, if you're for public option, just say that. And you didn't say that because you wanted to say you were for Medicare for All. Now it's revealed, but it's only revealed now, prematurely, because people hounded her about it in the primary. Otherwise, she would have gotten to the general and she would have did exactly what Harry Reid just said. Contributor appreciation tomorrow, Majin Bull. If so, what time? Yes. Appreciation will be tomorrow, let's say 4 o'clock, just to be on the safe side, but it may be a little bit earlier. How many days? Like, share, subscribe. Just checking. One last check. think so.